Welcome in everyone to a very special episode of American Joyride. I'm joined today by Kelsi Sheren. She's the CEO and author of Brass and Unity and host of the popular Brass and Unity podcast, which has some great guests itself. I encourage you all to check it out as well. Thank you very much for being here, Kelsi.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Well, as you can see, we've got your book right over your shoulder there. We're going to get into that. I can see your podcast logo across your other shoulder. We have a ton to cover today. I know one of the big things with you is trauma, overcoming trauma. That is always something the audience is fascinated by. But before we get into that, we kind of got to start at the beginning. How did you find yourself in the Canadian military?
I met a lady on a bus.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
How'd that go?
It was super simple. So in Canada, we have Remembrance Day, and you guys call it Veterans Day. And it's just, for us, it's a solemn day. For you guys, it's like a happy Veterans Day. So for us, we go down to these ceremonies and we wear the poppy and we celebrate, or we remember those that we have lost over the decades of fighting and war and that Canada's been involved in. And we take time and we have the moment of silence at 11 o'clock. And so it's really a solemn day for us. And I grew up in Ontario, and that's, the capital of Canada. And my family, I didn't know of anybody that was in the service. So, but we always went down to Remembrance Day ceremonies, always. So I was in college when I was 18. I just turned 18, and I went down to the ceremony in Ottawa, and I was on the bus back to the college, and I met a lady on a bus, and she was an older lady in a uniform with a whole bunch of medals on, and she had this air about her. I talk about it. I've said it before, but I think it's like the best analogy I can give is these moments where when you look back and you plot charts to see, the trajectory of someone's life. And for me, it was that highlight, almost as if it was like a bright main light kind of around her. And it was like, go to her. So I went and chatted with her for a little bit, and something about her clicked with me, something about the way she carried herself. And I knew right then and there I was going to join the Army.
In what year, what time period is this? Is the GWOT well underway? Did you know if you joined the Canadian military that there was a very high chance you were going to end up finding yourselves overseas?
Yeah, so Canada became involved a little later after you guys kind of broke shit, and we're like, we're NATO, so I guess we're involved. So I think I joined in 2007, the end of 2007, and by 2009, I was on the ground. So we knew early on, when you walk in the recruiter's office, they were pretty open and honest about it. Like, look, depending on the job you want to do, there's a lot that needs to be filled, and it needs to be filled because we're on a rotation right now. And we don't have the same population size as America, and nor do we have the same fighting force as America in terms of we don't have Marines. We have Army, Air, and Navy. So we don't, and then we have our special operations, CSOR, JTF2, and all those guys. But I was a woman, so that was a hard out. So that wasn't going to happen. But for me, I knew if I was going to join the Army, it wasn't going to be pushing paper. And like, I don't say that in a degrading way. I say it in a way that it takes all of us to make the service run, right? We need people to push the paper, to be able to get us the weapons, to be able to do our jobs, to be able to pay our, our rent, all of these things. So it takes everyone. But for me personally, I wanted to be affecting change on the ground as quickly as I could. And so I picked artillery because the idea of a tin can freaked me out around IEDs. And I knew that when you hit one of these IEDs, because we were seeing it on the media, right? We were seeing that you hit an IED and there was almost like no chance in hell you were going to survive that if you were a driver. And I'm 5 foot, 110 pounds. So I knew if I went armored, I was going to be a driver or a turret gunner. Infantry, I tried to apply for, and they basically laughed me off and were like, you're too small, you won't be able to do it. And then artillery, they're like, okay, if you can't do infantry, let's give you 100-pound rounds and see if you can throw those around instead. So I went artillery. I did the training. Literally, they're like, oh, it'll be quick. Literally joined, swore in the very end of November, December. And then I was in basic training like January 3rd. So it was rapid fire. And there was no pat. Like I was like course to course to course to regiment to deployment. There was no time in between.
And when you finally get over there, and like you said, there's been no breaks. You're very young at this point. I mean, you're fresh, a few years removed from high school, or is that what they call in Canada, high school, secondary school?
Yeah, high school. I left high school at 17 and I went to college early so that I could try out for the soccer team. So I was 17 when I went to college. I turned
Gotcha.
18 in September and then I joined the Army as soon as I was legally allowed to sign.
Did you have a perception in your mind of what combat was going to be like compared to what it actually turned out to be like? And how are those two things different?
I think most of us have a general idea of what we think it will be like due to Hollywood overglorifying war, due to the media rapid firing, and you would see the coffins coming home with the flags draped. I mean, the media did a fantastic job, like it does everywhere else, kind of propagandizing and uplifting the idea of wiping innocent civilians off the face of the earth. Like we do a really good job of saying that all these people that look like this are bad. So we do propagandize people before they join. And it was like that for 9/11. I mean, I remember where I was at 9/11. The majority of my friends, when we host the show, if I'm talking to an operator, where were you? We all know. We all joined because we wanted to, for the greater good, right? You didn't think about what does it mean to actually pull a trigger? What does it mean to actually pull a lanyard? Where is that 100-pound round landing? What is that landing on top of? You don't think about those things in the same way because, and I'm sure you've heard this before, you go, you serve, you do all your training, you're just ramped up to go and actually put it into action. You're not thinking about what that action looks like. So it's all fun and games until you're standing in front of somebody with an AK-47 and you go, you shoot who I shoot, who's going to live, right? It's a really fucked up situation to be in. Sorry, I don't know if I can curse on this show.
You can say whatever you want on this show.
I feel like operators have been here. I feel like I'm not the only one to curse on it. So, but in saying that, yeah, for sure, it's definitely different. I mean, I say in any of my keynotes, there's a moment that I remember and it hit me really hard. And I say it because it illustrates that weight. And it was, that saying of like, I knew what I was in for until I was sitting on the Herc on the the transition flight to Afghanistan when we were flying, left, right, and up and down tactical flights. And I looked at my rifle and I was like, holy shit, there's rounds in this. And I just kind of say like, the weight of those decisions were now in my hand, just in the form of a rifle. So became a little bit of a shock to the system. We landed in Kandahar. We landed in Kaf. I stepped off that Herc and felt like I walked into a microwave. And I was like, oh my God, I'm actually here. Like I am actually outside these walls are people who are every waking moment planning and want me dead and want everything I stand for dead. And the media does a great job to make you think that. And that's not always the reality either, right?
Right. Well, you just said a lot of things that I'm absolutely fascinated by.
Sorry about that.
No. It seems like you've done a lot of deep reflection, obviously, over the entire thing. When did that reflection start for you? Did it start within the first couple of weeks? Did it take time? Like, when did you start thinking much deeper than I'm trained, I'm ramped up? When did that reflection period begin?
Probably not until long after I was out of service. I think when you're in service, I think it's your all. And I think I didn't have a family or a husband or a child. I wasn't a mother yet. I was just ramped up to go. And it sounds really fucked up when you look backwards because you're like, what were you ramped up for? You mean that you were ramped up to go kill people? Yeah, I was fucking ramped up to go kill the people that were killing my people and sending the people that I knew that had, wives and children at home dead. And, and they were never coming home. And so that to me bothered me. I didn't think about myself dying. I thought about these dudes that were parents and these moms that were parents. For me, I had nothing. I'm saying I didn't have any attachments, but I didn't have anything to be like, oh, someone's going to miss me. When they made me write my will at 18 years old, it became a real stark reality that I didn't have anything and I didn't have anything to leave anybody. I didn't have anyone to leave it to. So I wasn't concerned. It didn't scare me. I knew that I was there for a greater good and that's all that mattered. But the self-reflection really started to come much later on into my healing journey, especially when I started to utilize psychedelics as a property of healing and going inward. So I think that probably would be the most recently, probably 3 to 5 years where I really started to look deeply at the implications of my actions and my decision making.
Well, it's fascinating you bring up psychedelics because I've had multiple people on this show who said the same thing. And I know of at least one who's been on your show that I emailed you about briefly, a former Delta Force guy who's big on the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So Then let's get into the part before the self-reflection. When you see the death, when you see the violence, at the time, are you numb to it? Is it exciting? Is it adrenaline? Like in the moment before you have the opportunity to step back and you're seeing killing and you're blowing stuff up, what's that like in the moment?
So for me, when I first got there, it's hard for people to understand. So I'm Canadian. I'm a Canadian artillery gunner. That being said, I was one of the only women at my gun troop. So the regiment that I deployed with, there were some bad females on other guns, but we deploy in guns of 2. So we had 2 777s. 2 were always together, Alpha and Bravo, and I was on Alpha. There was another female with our unit, but she was an officer, so she was in the tent. So I didn't, really associate with her. I didn't really rock with her at all, but she was there, but we didn't, we worked out together a couple times. But for the majority, it was just me as myself and a bunch of dudes. And so when we got there, it wasn't necessarily like, oh, I'm ready to go and life, or I'm going, it was always like, I know what I need to do. As long as I hold up my end of the bargain, other people are going to hold up theirs. And that all that meant was like, be there for one another, do the job. And I didn't think about what we were, honest to God. I know it sounds really naive and it sounds like, well, how could you not, Kelsi? Come on. It's like, now I can, but I did not think about where these rounds were landing. I knew subconsciously you're sending 100-pound HE round down range and you're sending, 20, 30 at a time. We're blanketing an area for a reason. But to me, it was never like, oh, we're killing people. To me, it was like, okay, there's a bunch of dudes that need help and they're being overrun, or they're having issues, or they need smoke. We need to pop smoke because they need to pull back. We need to find someone. We need to, you know what I mean? I wasn't thinking, oh my God, I'm dropping HE on people. That being said, when we left Kandahar and we got on a Chinook, when we got flown out to a FOB, I was flown out to an American FOB. So I worked for Americans. I was pulling rounds down range for American guns and anybody that was in the vicinity in the Maiwand district of FOB Ramrod. Now, there was a point where I left the guns and I was pulled by the British. So I had a really unique deployment where, of course, a lot of people work with different countries, but I was individually put as a separate person by myself with other people. And that was because I was in 2009, Americans, I think it wasn't up until 2015, women weren't doing those jobs yet as CST, cultural support teams.
Right.
And you guys didn't have those. So the British and the Americans would take the Canadian women and go drop them into units, and we would just be their CSTs. Now, my regiment was French. So I'm a Canadian person, but our country's second language is French. So for most people who don't understand that, when I got to my regiment, I was posted to an all French regiment. And for context, I did like a couple of years of French in school. Like, we do it when you're young, and I can say like, yes, no, toaster, but like, you want me to start pulling rounds down range and in panic situations start yelling in another language that I barely understood. I had 8 months to learn it. And like, the only way I had to learn it was just being immersed in it. There was no classes. There was no lessons. It was like, you're on parade and everyone turned and you're like, oh shit, that meant left. So it was a different experience once I went with the British. When I was at the FOB, there was a detachment of what we were landing rounds down on. I had the 101st guys at our FOB, and they would tell me all about it. And I became good friends with a lot of them. And, they were telling me a lot of stories from outside the wire and things like that. And I knew, like, we all know, we all hear about it, but to see it was a different ball game. So when I finally went with the British, that's where like the rubber met the road. And I really saw what death and destruction and artillery, when you're underneath it, can do, and what small arms fire and serious IED shit could do.
And for the audience who's unfamiliar with CSTs, I spoke to Jack Scott, who actually introduced the two of us. Jack's is awesome. CSTs, as you can talk about, like, they go on target. Like, they're right there. So are you able to say what British unit you were attached to?
Yeah, so I was in a bit of a shit mix. There was a huge operation going on, unbeknownst to me. I was above my pay grade. I just got told I was going with these dudes. And it was a mix of, I had some of the Black Watch, I had the 3rd Scot Battalion of Scotland, and the British are mixed countries, right, in terms of how their military looks. So I served with Irish, English, Scottish. I served with South African, Fijian. So I had this really eclectic group of dudes around me, all under the British flag, and then me. So it was a really cool experience to be around these guys. They were as switched on as I've ever seen. They were quick. They knew what they were doing. And these dudes, a lot of them had done deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. This wasn't their first rodeo. So for me, it was a real comforting feeling, and they welcomed me right away. As soon as they saw that I could move the way they needed me to move, do what I'm told, do it effectively, and then hold my own in a situation, there was a different respect factor given. But it took like a second for them to kind of see, okay, this is a 5 foot tall person who's carrying a 65, 70 pound pack. Like, are we gonna have to carry her? You could see the hesitation in people's faces when I got dropped off. And fair enough, I was barely at that time 19 years old. So, I mean, I get it. I understood their hesitation, but once I was able to kind of show up a little bit, they were good with it.
Did you like being that close to violence on target? Because I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, there's a difference between firing artillery shells where you kind of know where they're landing, but you're not near where they're falling. And now you could be in a room with some guy with an AK who could just spray the whole doorway. You're standing right there.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to do when I started, though, right? I wanted to be an infantry member. So when they said it, you get to leave the FOB instead of just working out and waiting for a fire mission, you get to go run and gun. That's what I wanted to do before I even joined the military. I wanted to be infantry. And the reason I wanted to be that was I come from a background of incredibly A-type personality, of a leadership role in sports, and from a competitive aspect of I knew how to hold my own, in my opinion, because I was a fighter. I knew from a physicality standpoint what I could achieve, but it's very unassuming, right? Because I'm so small, and I think at the time I was like 102 pounds. So it was very unassuming for people in that standpoint, but I did know what I was capable of. I just wanted the opportunity to do that job.
And what point did you start struggling mentally where you're thinking to yourself, something's off, something's not right, I need to either speak to someone, something needs to happen because the deck has been reshuffled?
That was when I witnessed my first IED explosion with people involved. When we had that operation happen, things just didn't go right from the get. It was all they kept telling me, the very quick briefing I got. So I got dropped off from the FOB. They picked me up. They were supposed to pick me up the day before. The Chinook were supposed to come get me the day before from the FOB, and it was taking rounds, so they had to turn around. And then my sergeant said, like, look, in a super French accent, like, look, if they can't come get you tomorrow, like, they're just going to take someone else. And then I got pissed off because now I'm ready to go. I want to go. I'm getting out of the FOB. I get to go do this job I was really stoked about. And so finally they came to get me the next day, and they were able to get me. And so we went to CAF, and I landed in CAF. And what they kind of told me was like, hey, you're on your own here. No one's here to tell you what to do. You don't have a leadership role in terms of like a chain of command. Yeah, you need something, you go to the British, but I was a no-hook gunner. Let me just state that. I was in the service for a year and a half before I was let out on my own in a war zone. Okay? So let's just get that completely out there. I was not trained properly for that job. Like, that's just the real of it. And people say, well, then why did you say no? I don't know if you've ever tried to tell your chain of command no, but that shit ain't gonna fly. My sergeant tried to tell his warrant officers and his master warrant officer she's not going. They're like, no, but she is. So he knew, being somebody who had served in Bosnia, who had served in Croatia, had done tours before, he knew right off the get, this is a fucking bad idea. This is a bad idea. And the only reason I, in my opinion, survived that was because my sergeant had taken so much time with our regiment before and done a ton of house clearing. So like, he knew if we had to move these guns and we had to go on the road with these 777s, they were massive targets, like $1 million a barrel level fucking, we don't want these to blow up targets. And that's why we move them in the air so much. But if we came into contact, we needed to know how to dismount. We need to know how to move and shoot. And if we had to go into compound, we need to know how to not get shot in the back. Like, that's just the truth of it. So Sergeant LeBlanc, he's now an officer. And so I try to not terrorize him about that. But it is, the reason I survived was because he took the extra time to be like, okay, we're going to go house clear. Okay, you know what? Yeah, you guys are good with your rifles, but I want you to be better. So we're going to go get level 4 clearance. We're going to go train and we're going to get you guys certified in all these different levels of shoot and move and don't get shot. And when you go on the, you know, left, right, up, down, like communication was key. And so because of that, when I went with the Brits, I felt confident that I knew if I had to stack up on a door, I wasn't going to fuck it up. I wasn't going to go to someone and get or shoot them in the back. And I've had people ask me recently being like, do you really think that you were that effective? Well, I didn't shoot anybody in the fucking back and I didn't get shot in the back. So I don't think it was that bad. That being said, you can always be better. I'm not a special operator. I was taken away from my job, the thing I was trained for, and I did the best I could with what I had. So when I did stack up, I wasn't that stressed about it. I was to go in and I wasn't supposed to shoot. I was supposed to go in, find those women and kids, grab them and move them into another room as quickly as physically possible so that the rest of those places could be searched rapid fire. And then my job, while everyone was standing out there waiting for me, was to search like enormous amounts of women and kids by myself and just hope that it goes well.
Yeah, I can see how passionate you are looking back on the memories. When you see that IED blast involving people, did it have an impact on you immediately, or did it take a couple days?
No. It was fucking hot, fast. Like, it was like not good. We were sitting in a district, we were in the Pandora district, we were on foot. And part of the problem and why people squawk about this is I was shuffled aggressively. So like they told me, we won't need you. We don't use CSTs. Women and kids flee. The Brits were like, normally when we go in, there's none there. So we'll keep you backed up with the bomb dog or with the medic. Like there's only a few of us, right? So if there's a medic, a bomb dog, and a CST, we don't go on the roofs and do sentry because there's only a few of us, right? So they keep us back unless they really need us. Then they pull us up to the front. And as soon as we landed, it was the middle of the night and we were sitting in this wide open space and we just waited there until morning prayer. So we were there for like 3 or 4 hours, just kind of wait out. And I love that we wait till their prayers are over and before we kick them and kick the door in because they don't fucking wait for us. So it was an ironic, I was like, what are we waiting for? They're like, morning prayer. I'm like, why? Respect. I'm like, for why? Are we not at war right now? Like, what's happening? So we went and they got a call immediately. They're like, oh, we need the CST up. And I was like, oh, I thought you guys like, I don't know, just go. So one dude would come get me and we would rock up to the front and they're like, they're all in the room. Go do your thing. And I remember the first compound I ever went into. I have photos of it because I was so dumbfounded because I had no clue. And all these women and kids are just sitting in this room, terrified of me, absolutely horrified. Like the worst feeling you could ever have as a parent is to see a stranger with a gun and a bunch of like grenades and ammunition walk in and be like, stand against a wall. I'm going to touch you now. Like, it's not a good vibe, man. Even when I think about it now, like makes me feel sick to my stomach. So we went through all that. And when the IED went off, I knew about IEDs. I knew what they were doing. I understood the damage they do. But I had never, like I said, I had never witnessed what it does to a human body. And then I had never witnessed having to do body collection. So it wasn't until that moment where when I felt the ground shake and I looked and whipped my head to the left and I saw what it does, the shock of that hit, and it was more of the confusion at that point. And then when all hell broke loose and one of the other guys came running out of the building and he had no kid on and I couldn't understand it. Like there was that moment of like, where's all his shit? It didn't compute that like the blast was so gnarly. It literally blew his helmet and the rest of his kit off and it twisted his fucking barrel of his rifle. Like I didn't put 2 and 2 together. I just saw blood. I saw a dude running and I was like, where's his shit? Like, because it just couldn't compute. And then when we were finally given the go ahead to go toward the compound, like the grape hut that had the IED in it, that's when I noticed things shift. You know, that thing that happens in movies that you see where if you were to put your hands over your ears and you're to breathe and you get the, and you're moving slow, like that real like mud movie, like slow down. That's what happened. And we jumped in, we got off the road because it hadn't been cleared. And we jumped into the ditch on the left-hand side and we started moving. And I think it was like a handful of us. And there was like 2 dudes. I can't remember. It's been so long. I think it was like 2 or 3 dudes in front of me and like 2 behind me. something along those lines. And we ran, and we were just running along this ditch. It's like you couldn't get there fast enough. You couldn't move fast enough. You couldn't breathe properly. It just, my whole nervous system, now I understand what was happening. It just fucking kicked into hyperdrive, right? In a way that I'd never felt before. Once we got to the road and they're like, okay, we need to cross the ditch here. And we know now that they're watching, right? Because rounds are starting to come down. So they're like, okay, like 3, 2, 1, and we jump and we run into the grape hut. I had this surreal moment where I genuinely looked around and was like, where is he? Because like, I couldn't compute. My brain couldn't compute what I'd just seen. It just couldn't rationalize. It was like error. I could feel it going like, something's wrong. And when one of the Brits came over, I believe it was Stephen Noble, he tapped me on the shoulder and he goes, are you good, Burns? Because my maiden name is Burns. And I whipped my head around and I was like, yeah, I'm good. Fucking not good. I call it the light switch moment, where I felt my entire nervous system go, like a wall came down and was like, nope, that's not good. We can't handle that. And there's the wall. And then we started rapidly doing body collection as quick as possible, because we started getting mortared, and we started getting mortars down, and then rounds started flying. And so we knew we didn't have a lot of time. So we started collecting what we could. One of the guys was laying down cover fire, and one of the other guys came with, those green stretchers?
Yeah. And
we just started piling shit on top of just whatever we had, piling it. Whatever we couldn't put on there, just put in pockets, right? Like just fucking nothing left behind. And it's funny because some people have come back, right? And been like, you weren't there for that. And I'm like, I have photos. Like I have real photos of these events. And I think that hurts more than being in the event.
Wait, so real quick, people have accused you of fabricate, like, you don't have to name them, but
no, it's okay.
Why? What's their motivation for that?
Well, when you start getting on some of the world's biggest platforms and you're the woman in the situation and you write the book and you get the TV deal and you get the shit that others have never healed from or done the work for, right? That's what happens, right? Nobody hates a successful veteran more than another veteran.
I've heard that from other people. You're not the first person to make
fucked
that
up, though, isn't it? Right? Yeah, we dick measure our trauma. It's fun. It's a good group to be in. So I like that, and I think that's the hardest part, is because forget the rest of the operation. After that, shit was still going wrong. People were still dying. I had some crazy shit happen, and none of that mattered after, because I was so numb and I was so shut off from that moment. When I look back and go, where was the key point? Where was that light, that shining light of like, life's going to change? It was right the fuck there. It was June 11th, right around 11 a.m. So I remember it. I remember it for the rest of my life. It was one of the hardest days of my life. It was one of the worst days of my life. But it was the catalyst point to my brain broke. Literally, like my brain was like, nope, it broke. So I don't know a better way to describe it, but we end up, we're taking rounds and things were getting crazy. And I had done this training in Alberta. So we call it Wainwright. I call it Wayne Cock because it's cold and it sucks. And it's like in the winter, it's the worst. But we did this all hands on deck, air, army, all of it, like mock war. And we were each given 4 live rounds, just 4. That was it. And one of the guys in my unit, one of the only English guys in my unit, we're sitting in the back of the truck. We're rolling down. And he pops around and he fucking NDs through the top. Chop.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, I remember his name and I won't say it because it was like the only other English dude around. And I was just like, bro, you just ND'd a live round. Anyway, so that was the first time, because we were shooting live rounds. It was the first time I had heard, like, they were popping smoke and they were doing crazy stuff, right, to really simulate it. And that was the only other time I'd felt adrenaline like that. And so I'd only ever heard bullets whizzing away from me. I had never heard them whizzing close to me. And so when we're running, I remember it incredibly distinctly. There's a guy in front of me. He's carrying the back of the stretcher, and another guy in the front who's got the other end of the stretcher. And at this point, I don't know why I did this because, I think I remember now. They didn't have a sling left on his rifle. So what I did is I slung my rifle, and I had 2 helmets. So the 2 guys that were just involved, one on this arm and one on this arm like this. And I had the rifle that was twisted in this hand. And we just started running. And one of the guys tripped and dropped part of the stretcher. And so we had to go back and put it back up. And this is the first time I heard like the whiz, pop. And I didn't think anything of it, but I was like, this feels close. This is too close. And it was I don't remember feeling my legs. I don't remember my body. I just remember the slow motion breathing. And that will sit with me for the rest of my life, what that feels like.
So you say that this is where the brain said, nope, it snaps, it's broken. You remember the breathing. People handle trauma differently. Everyone does, right? For you personally, what was that journey like when your brain broke? And then we'll get into the recovery aspect. Yeah. But the downward slope for you, what did that look like?
Yeah, I think the thing we have to remember is like when you're trained for these things, it might be okay and you have a chance of coming out alive. I was not trained for this shit. Let's be honest with ourselves, man. I wasn't trained for this. Nope. And so that's the thing I had to sit back and look at as to like, why do you think he reacted that way? Because I had never been in a situation like that. So I didn't give my body and nervous system an opportunity to become comfortable in that state. And I think that's why the damage was so significant. So when we got back to the compound and rounds are still coming down range, we had called the Pedro flights, right? So we had 2 Blackhawks come in. One came to pick up the dead and the injured, and the other came around and unleashed. And I'd never seen this before, which was one of the greatest feelings I've ever had. These guys and these door gunners just came out and absolutely unleashed living hell on the ground. And then things got silent. And when they got silent, I was sitting up against, I remember to the right of me, it was a group of guys cut in a circle, and they were all kind of chain smoking. And then right onto my front of my left here was my buddy Craig, and he's a medic. And I remember sitting there, and it's like I couldn't rationalize where I was or where my body was in space and time. I just kept looking down at my hands because I didn't have gloves on when I was doing this. And I started becoming obsessive with rubbing. Couldn't get the stuff off my hands, right? To the point where it just felt like it was there no matter what. And I just kept rubbing, aggressively, rubbing. And I knew right there that like things were not normal. He came over into me and he's like, it's okay. You're good. It's okay. He had done a few tours. He got it. He could see it that I wasn't okay. I wasn't crying or anything because I couldn't feel anymore. So like I didn't feel, I was numb now. Like that real traditional, like I feel nothing. That's where I was. Now I was angry. So it went from like, I feel nothing to like indescribable levels of rage. Like just like unbelievable. Like I never thought I could feel so hateful. And he put hand sanitizer on me and I just kept rubbing and I just, I can't get it off. And I just kept like obsessive rubbing my hands. And then I asked for a cigarette and they're like, you don't smoke and you're not going to start now. They wouldn't give me one. I'm grateful for that. But, you know, everyone was like fucking chain smoking. And I was like, that looks like it works. It looks like it works. Can I try? And they're like, no. So, and then 10 minutes later, we got up and we pushed on.
I'm literally, I don't even have a reaction to a story of that caliber. That's unlike, I think I've been doing this for 2 years now. I've heard some absolutely insane stories of carnage. That Kelsi is right near the top of the list. When you came back to Canada, when you got out of the military, how quickly were you out once you returned?
Oh, no, it was like before that. So we had pushed on the rest of that week and we had a bunch of other shit happen, just like ridiculous things. And then we got picked up and then we got dropped back off at CAF. And when you're a CST, and I'm pretty sure Jax has told you this because she has Jax Act that's going on the floor this week. Yep. Thank God for her because she is changing. She is actually getting women CST the treatment they deserve that Jax and I didn't have, which was we get pulled away from the unit that we just went through the worst things of our lives with, who understand us, who get us, where you can look at me and they can get it. And we get dropped off back to wherever we came from, where no one understands it, where no one gets it. And wherever you look, people are like, what's wrong with her? Like, they don't get it, right? And so it's what happened to me. Brits went one way, I went another. And I got back to my guys, and I remember I got back to the Canada House side of CAF, which is where we all have like separated spots, right? And I walked into where they had a shipping container where I was staying. And I went into the shower, and there was always like no water, like little water. You have quick showers. And I think I sat in that shower for an hour. I just sat on the floor of that shower, and I think I had like full clothes, and I just fucking cried. I just cried excessively. I just couldn't breathe. I just cried. I just fucking cried. And I couldn't stop crying, couldn't stop shaking. But I also wasn't tired. I was pinging. And I remember telling somebody what happened to me. And we were sitting on the stairs. And it was one of my good girlfriends, Ben. She's in my book. And she looked at me and she's like, you can't tell anybody that. No one's going to believe you. No one believes you. No one believes you already. And I was like, what? They're like, yeah, the captain downstairs, he's going around saying that you're full of shit. And I know exactly who that captain is, and I'll never forgive him for that. And I was like, how could you say that? I have blood on my boots. I have it on my kit. And they're like, no, they don't believe you. And I was like, okay. And then I spent a week at CAF in that regiment, and I wasn't sleeping. I stopped sleeping completely, like completely. And I got a hold of a couple of the Brits that were with me, and they were at CAF, and I said, will you guys come hang out with me at the boardwalk? Come have coffee with me. I can't sleep. And they did. The bomb dog came. A couple of the other guys came, and they just sat with me at the Green Bean. I think it's called Green Bean because there's a Tim Hortons, and I think there was a Green Bean. There was another coffee shop there, but it stayed open longer than Tim Hortons. And they stayed there with me, and they just talked, and they just hung out, and we didn't talk about anything. They just stayed with me. And that went on for about a week. And then there was a break point where they put me to the quartermaster, because they didn't know what to do with me, because I hadn't gone back to the fob yet. And they were like, the warrant officer said something to me about my braid. Okay. And I unleashed hell. I was like, you motherfucker, you don't even know what it's like to be outside the wire, because I didn't have any ammunition left. Like, where's your mag, Burns? Because you have to have a mag on you all the time. It's like, why don't you go outside? Like, I just fucking like everything on the on-ramp, and I just, insubordination, like bad. They're like, okay. And they made me count pens. And then finally I said, I'm not good. And they sent me to the doctor. And within one session, the doctor was like, I think you have acute post-traumatic stress disorder, and I'd like to put you on some medication. And so they gave me a ton of drugs, and then sent me on my HLTA, which is my holiday. And I went to the Dominican Republic for 3 weeks, drugged out of my mind. I don't even know how I got there. And it was a disaster. I was there with my mother, and it was a fucking disaster. It was so bad. It was so bad. It just did not go well at all. And I came back, and they sent me back out to the guns, and I went back out to my fob. And at this point, it had made it around about what the operation was. And my sergeant, like, as you can see, I talk a lot, but I got dead silent. Dead silent. And he could see it. And then again, one of the corporals there said something to me, and I fucking went off. And I got a charge. They wrote me up. And my sergeant was like, something's wrong here. This is really bad. And then we had a fire mission that night. And it was like a middle of the night, like quick rounds down range sort of deal. I didn't even wake up. My tenor was right beside the guns. And I was so drugged up, I didn't even hear them. Like, and if you've been near a 155 millimeter howitzer and it's shooting, and you're like 30 feet from it, and the ground is literally like the whole thing is shaking, I didn't hear shit. And then my sergeant came to me and was like, where were you? He was just losing his mind. And I brought out the 11 bottles of pills. And he went, you can't be on this shit running a machine gun in a 777. I was like, I've been on them the whole time since I got back. And he was like, you need to go. You got to go. So they sent me back to CAF. And then they diagnosed me and said, she's going home. And they sent me home, I think it was 2 to 3 weeks early before the rest of my unit. Yeah. And then I went back to Canada, and that was the next year and a half of, they booted me from the regiment, told me to go to the hospital. I never saw my unit again. I never saw my guys again. No one knew what happened to me. No one communicated with me. I had nothing. And then I was being retrained, and that wasn't going well. And then they finally decided they were going to med board me. I got a 3B medical release with a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder of 72% in 2011.
Did you feel abandoned at that point?
Oh, worse than abandoned. It's a goddamn miracle I didn't kill myself.
Well, that was going to be my next question, and you just answered it. Were you drinking as well? Was there alcohol abuse? Was it pills the whole time? Like, what were you consuming to numb the feelings you had?
I was on so many different pharmaceutical drugs that I was never a drinker. I never drank. I still don't drink. It's never resonated with me. But yeah, I was on 11 at the height of it. At 19, I was going on 20. I was on 11 different pharmaceutical drugs. 11. So for sleep, not for sleep, I couldn't function. I would be up in the middle of the night, and I'd be making food, and I'd wake up on the floor after hitting my head, like cooking, like no fucking clue. I was numb. I wasn't there. I was a shell of a person, and I was just walking through life, but there was nothing inside. And I was super suicidal till about 2015. I had plans. I had letters written. I didn't ever attempt it, because the time I was going to attempt it, I made a decision that I was going to make one more phone call. And based off of somebody answered that call or not was kind of my sign from the world. Okay, you can go now. It's cool. Like I said, I was young. I didn't have attachments. I didn't have things. I had a cat. I got a cat when I got home. And he was kind of the saving grace. I was like, and I would get to that point and be like, well, then he's going to eat my face, and he'll have no one, because no one lives near me, then he'll die. Like, I can't do that to him. Like, so he was a big saving grace in a lot of that. You know, it's like a service dog. He's my service cat. He's an asshole.
I interviewed a guy about a year ago who was going to commit suicide, and the only reason he said he didn't is because his dog would be left alone.
Yeah.
And
no one would check on us. So
right. And that motivated him to go get help, and now he's been doing great for years. Now, you had talked about psychedelic use, and we've talked about this, this crazy up and down, and I want to get into that. But before I do have a question for you.
Sure.
I just interviewed a guy from the unit from Delta Force, and he's like, I have a unique view on it, and I'm paraphrasing that. In his mind, when you see extreme trauma and you lose guys, something really, really bad happens, in his opinion, his solution for it is you got to get back in there the next day as quickly as you can, pick a target, and get a win. Do you think that if you had gone straight into something that was highly successful 24 hours later, it would have changed how you felt about the bombing?
That's a really good question. I don't know that I needed to be successful on target, because I had done the couple things where we end up being successful on target. But what I did need is I needed to stay with the guys. I just needed to keep doing that job. Going from that level of movement to and that level of like tactical movement with that unit, and then being taken away from it and then put back to the 777s where it's a lot of waiting around until it's not. And then when it's not, it's like, it's all encompassing. I needed that, in my opinion, and I needed the people around me to be around me so that I could work through the trauma. But instead, I was ripped away and just given a whole bunch of drugs that just masked all the issues, which then just made it worse. And I understand that perspective. I totally get it, because you need to be, it's more, I don't think it's as much about getting a win. I think it's more about being around people that understood you. I think that's a really big thing. And Jocko said this to me once, and I think it helped me understand. And he said, do you think that if somebody just sat you down after and said, what just happened is normal, how you're feeling is normal, and you will get through this and you will move through this. Do you think you would have been okay? And I was like, yeah, for sure. I really do think I would have been okay. But instead, the answer was medication immediately and remove from the support network I had, which we now understand now. When you remove someone from their support network and they medicate them, their bodies and their nervous systems don't get a time to regulate. That's just what happens. And so for me, it was handled so poorly, so poorly. All I wanted to do was go back out with them. I just wanted to go back out because they just rotate us, right? They just take different women. Just fucking keep one person with one unit and just let them rock. You know, I did the job. I handled my own. Just let me go back out. All I wanted to do was go back out. That's it. And they just said, there's no chance.
It seems it's almost malpractice. It sounds like from the people that were overseeing your situation. Obviously in America, we have huge issues where our health industry loves throwing pills at every single problem it can find. I mean, you got a problem, here's some pills. You got a different problem, here's some more pills. So that we could be here for 5 hours about, but I want to focus on your incredible comeback story. And I do want to focus on the psychedelics thing because that is becoming a more and more popular thing with veterans who have seen and experienced extreme violence and carnage. When did you make the decision that you wanted to try that, and how did you even get introduced to it?
So it started slow for me. So in 2015, this was right around the time when Canada was making medical and recreational cannabis legal. So my treatment doctor at the time that I've had since 2011, I still have, he's still my dude. I still see him once a week. Old Bosnia, Rwanda, medic colonel, bad dude, just miserable old man and just the best guy ever. And he knew I wanted to have children. So this is something that, there's not a lot of women doing our jobs besides Jackson. Like, it feels like not a ton. So, the dudes don't resonate with this, but like, I wanted to have kids. And for me to have kids and not have a child that had developmental issues, I couldn't be on these meds. And so we started having the conversation about the reality of like, hey, I do want to have children at some point. And I just gotten married in 2014. So I can't be on them. So my surgeon, my doctor suggested cannabis. And so he had helped write legislation for Canadian veterans to get cannabis. He had done the first research on post-traumatic stress, post-Rwanda on veterans in Canada. He knew his shit. And he's like, look, we can get cannabis for you. I think this is going to help with your sleep. We take the sleep med away. That's going to make a difference. You'll be able to wake up in the morning and it'll just be this cyclical thing. I was like, cool. So I started using cannabis at night. I got a prescription. It was funded and prescribed. Once I started using cannabis from 2015 in conjunction with art therapy, I started to go off of the meds. And that's when I started my company. It was like 15, 16. And once I got to 19, it had been rocky and things were okay, but they weren't great. And I had my son. We lost our first child to a miscarriage, and we had our son in 2017. And I just wasn't getting better. I was just kind of getting worse in a weird way. And in 19, I said, I don't want to do these anymore. And, 20 rolled around and everything got crazy. And I started my podcast in October of 20. I think it was 20. Yeah, because it'll be 3 years this year. Yep. So I had to think about that. And such a blur the past couple of years. And I had a guy on the show. My husband suggested that I get sponsors for the show. And I'd been watching Shark Tank. And I saw Combat Flip-Flops on there. And I was like, I put bullets in jewelry and they put them in shoes and they're helping people. So my husband's like, give him a call. So I reached out, and I'm not exaggerating. Within like 30 minutes, Matthew Griffin emailed me back. He's like, yeah, we go together like peanut butter and jelly. I was like, let's go. And then I was like, I have to actually have people on the show. So I was like, do you want to come on the show? At this point, I had never dealt with any real other special operations. Never had friends in the American forces too much that were special operators or anything. And I was like so nervous to have like a ranger on the show. I was like, shit, like, whoa, this is a big deal. Had him on the show and we did it virtually and kind of just looked at me. And if you know Matthew Griffin at all in any way, shape, or form, he's like the wise old owl in your group. And he kind of leaned in and he was like, yo, are you good? I was like, yeah. Like real nonchalant. And he looked at me again. He's like, no, are you good? And I was like, and I just fucking just started bawling my eyes out. I was like, no, I'm not actually. I'm not good at all. I don't know what's wrong. I'm not getting better, yada, yada, yada. He goes, I think I need to introduce you to Heroic Hearts Project. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but let's do it. He goes, do you know what ayahuasca is? I was like, no, I mean, I've heard the name, like, but I don't understand. And he was okay, let me get you on the phone with the founder. So I got on the phone with the founder, Jesse Gould, who's another ranger. And he started telling me about ayahuasca and this program. And I was like, okay. He's like, but you can't be on SSRIs. And the last pharmaceutical drug I was on at that point was my SSRI. So if you understand SSRIs at all, you understand that you're not supposed to be on them. Doctor's handbook kind of says like 2 months max. And, the saying goes, I put you on them, but I don't take you off them because the chances of you dying by suicide are pretty high. So I said to my doctor, I called him after talking to Jesse, and he's like, there's a retreat in 30 days. Do you want to be on it? And I just said, yes. Like, I didn't talk to my husband. I always talk to him about this stuff. I was like, yes, I'm on it. Called my doctor and I was like, yo, he's like, what's up? I was like, I'm going off of it. And he was like, I don't recommend it. And I was like, I don't care what you recommend. I'm doing it. I'm not calling you to ask permission. I'm calling you to tell you what I'm doing. So if something goes wrong, you're aware. And he was like, why are we doing this? Gave him the playbook. He was like, okay, I don't understand it, but I'm gonna let you do this. So I went off of it in a really like cold turkey after almost a decade on it, which was dangerous, not recommended, and do not do it. It is not a good idea. And it's terrible for your body. So I went off of it. Then 30 days later, I was sitting in a circle filled with Blackwater, Rangers, SEALs, MARSOC, and I was the only woman in the group again. And I remember just kind of walking in feeling so intimidated until all these dudes who had done this before sat down and were like, we got you. You're good. I'm going to put you right between him and him. We're going to be right in the middle and we fucking got you. And I just remember hysterically bawling when I heard them say that. Even to this day, when I say that, I get chills because that was the first time since 2009 where I heard a service member say, I got you. I got you. And it hit like a fucking freight train. And it gave me that permission that, okay, I'm safe. And then we went into the journey, and the founder was actually in my circle at that time. So he's part of my, what I call my pack, my people. And I walked out of that and I never went back on a pharmaceutical med. I had no suicide. I haven't had suicidal ideations since. And since then I've leaned into psychedelics in a real way to the point where I actually leave on Saturday. I am one of the only Canadians to be granted special approval through the Canadian Special Access Program. There's 130 Canadians that have access. I am officially one to have regulated psilocybin, and I'm the proof of concept patient for Apex Labs to sit with a macro dose, and I'm the first person to do it. So I believe in the power of psychedelics. I believe in the power of our organizations, and I am also a psychedelic integration coach for Heroic Hearts Project now. And I believe that it's going to take within the community to heal the community. And I believe that Heroic Hearts Project is changing the world because of that. So I believe in them wholeheartedly.
Would you like to see psychedelics in the U.S. be used more regularly? Because obviously there's laws that are really, really strict in this country. What would your thoughts on that be? Like, what would you tell a congressman or a senator or Biden if he was president, on top of what you just said of like, here's why this is better than the pills?
I've actually done that. I've testified at the Senate subcommittee in Canada for emerging treatments for psychedelics and veterans and RCMP officers. And I said the same thing. I said, I will say the same thing I said there. This is the thing that's actually going to heal us, not blanket over the issue. I said, if you really, truly want people to be fixed and healed and on a path to recovery, this is what you'll do. If you continue to say no to this, then that signals to me that you don't actually want us to heal. It signals that you want us as a vending machine for the pharmaceutical companies that you guys get kickbacks from. That's what that is. Simple, period, across the board. What you choose to do after the research we have with Johns Hopkins and Imperial College of London and all these incredible universities that have taken the risk in studying this, that's all it says. You say this is illegal still, that's what you're telling us is we don't want you to heal. That's simple.
Look, I've come around on the issue. I was never really against the issue. I just didn't know anything about it. And the more people I talk to who've done it, they're all guys. You're the first woman that I've ever spoken to from the military that's done it. But
shocker.
Yeah, but like a lot of tier one guys, and one guy told me that he was circling the drain. And the only reason he didn't end up taking his life was because he did those treatments. I don't know if he still does, but he did for a long time. And he says it completely changed everything about him. I just have a few more questions. Do you have a little bit more time still?
Yeah, you're good.
One of the issues we currently have, well, actually, let me ask this first because it's more on point. The euthanization of Canadian veterans, that became a huge story in America here. I had no idea that was happening. You said it's been happening for several years now. It's not like a new thing, but it blew up when it was reported in American media. I think it's disgusting. I think it's one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen. You're Canadian. You struggled mentally. Why is that even an option on the table?
Do you want to talk about the honesty, or you want to talk about what people think it is?
I would say, well, can I take a guess at what the honest answer is?
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to eliminate the problem than it is to fix the problem.
Mm-hmm. It's not only easier to eliminate the problem and the liability, but it's easier to keep people who are unwell, right? So if you keep people on meds, people make money. It's also easier to kill you because you make a lot of money. So let's take a look at it. So 2019, we got reports. This happened. This kind of broke in 2022. But the reports going back as far as 2019, I've had some of the guests on my show. Christina Gauthier, she was one of the first female artillery gunners in the Canadian Armed Forces, became paralyzed. She's a gold-winning Olympian, Invictus Games, you name it, she's done it. And she was offered MAID, which is medical assistance in dying, when she was asking for a wheelchair ramp and wheels for her wheelchair. So let's look at it. If you keep veterans on pharmaceutical medication and you don't actually give them the tools to heal, you just keep giving them things like EMDR, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and you give them, like other little therapies here and there, right? That's not going to work for everybody. Humans are different. We go through a human experience, and everybody's going to be drastically, one end of the spectrum to the next. We understand that certain things are going to work for people and certain are not. But yet the answer to the Canadian government, or from the Canadian government, is really simple. Cognitive behavioral therapy and medication intervention. And we can now state that it is acknowledged failure. It doesn't work. We know that. It helps, it alleviates, but it doesn't get to the root of the problem, because you're numbing the part of the body that needs to go deeper. You're not allowing yourself to go deeper. So if we keep doing things that way, things are going to stay the way they are. People are going to die by suicide at the rates that are skyrocketing astronomically, right? What happened was somebody stupid decided they were going to start offering medical assistance in dying to veterans on the phone. Well, then the smart people, like the special operators and the others, started recording those phone calls. Okay. And in 2022, a friend of mine came to me and said, Kelsi, I'm about to break a story. I'm talking to a media. My buddy, this is what happened. I said, I want to hear the audio recording. So he let me hear it. And I talked to the guy on the phone, and he was like, I don't even live in the country anymore. I'm like afraid. I was like, okay. So his name didn't come out. They did what is called like an inquiry in Ottawa, where they brought in a couple people who had accused the government. And then the Veterans Affairs Minister went out on the West Block with Mercedes Stephenson and bold-faced lied right there and then. Said, we only know of one. We only have proof of a handful of people. We don't, and it only was one case manager. Well, when we look at the data and we look at the real results, it was a female and male case manager who were on different parts of the country. So we know now that it's at least two case managers. Each case manager has a caseload of 50 to 70 people on average. Okay, so how many other people were you offering it to? What were you offering it for? Because when the one guy called, he was asking for support for traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress. He was not offering or saying he was suicidal in any way, shape, or form. Christina Gauthier was asking for a fucking wheelchair ramp, dude. So she wasn't saying, I want to die at all. She just became an Olympian and won a gold medal in Rio, and then she just did Invictus Games. Her life was not bad. She just wanted to be able to move about freely in her house and then outside. So we started to see it. We started to see letters. We started to see auto recordings. And they did the inquiry, and that was it. They said, look, but we paid attention to you. We let you say your piece. We don't believe you, yada, yada. And then what happened was the Canadian government decided they were going to flip the script. And in Canada, we have this thing like America, where if you say, I'm going to kill myself, they will come hold you on a 72-hour hold, a psych hold, for your own safety. Canada decided that they were going to take the MAID bill, which offers terminally ill patients and people who are in such distressing life situations. You're quadriplegic. You don't have anyone to look after you. You just think about the worst of the worst, why you wouldn't want to be here anymore. And they were like, that was what MAID was specific for. Okay. I get it. Used to get it. I don't agree with it now. And then what they said is they were going to amend it for the mentally ill. Okay. Last time the world started seeing when governments were offering to kill people who were liabilities, World War I veterans, people who were in wheelchairs, people who were mentally disabled or intellectually incapable. Who was the last people who started to take those people and walk them into gas chambers?
The
right?
Germans, the Nazis.
There it is. So Canada said, look, if you're mentally ill, depression, fibromyalgia, just bad days, you can walk into a hospital. And they disagree with this, but I have a slideshow to prove otherwise. Within 24 hours, you can end your life. So they'll not only do it, they'll do it at the hospital. So that means that the government's making money off of that. Someone's making money off of that to push that bill through. So I had heard about it. I started getting really loud about it. I got really pissed off about it. And I knew for a fact that they were offering it to mentally ill. And I was like, that's not okay. I don't accept this. It got so much noise and attention that they tabled the bill. And they said, okay, we're going to make it for March of 2024. We're going to start making it. But as early as last month in my province, in one of my local hospitals, a young woman walked in and said, I'm not feeling well. I need to see a psychiatrist. And the nurse sat down and looked at her and said, what about MAID? So they're offering it and they're doing it. Another individual I know that I'm starting to get to know that lives not far from me, her mother, same situation, went in, and before her whole family even knew, they ended her life. The RCMP got called. It was so fucking fast. To the point where this year when I was doing my book tour, the Daily Mail reached out about the book and they wanted to talk about the book. And I was like, okay, but I also want you to know about this. And they said, what the fuck's going on? And I said, you guys not know about this? And they're like, no. So this reporter, I got a slideshow that was being offered to perfectly healthy pensioners in British Columbia in the Fraser Health District. And they sent a slideshow and did a meeting at the Newton Library where they went to the pensioners and said, if you want to end your life, this is how we can help you do it. We get that life is stressful. We get that life is expensive, but we can help you end your life with dignity. It was a slideshow that was aggressive. I'll send it to you. It's fucking wild. I sent it to the Daily Mail. And the Daily Mail vetted it, and they're like, this is real. And I was like, yeah, it is. And then when they reached out for comment, Fraser Health said, we haven't sent that to anyone, where the metadata said it was sent to thousands. So they're preying on everyday healthy people who are just older now because they're a burden on the system, right? And so the reason they target veterans, like they target military when they're doing new vaccines or new testing, we target veterans and military because we're owned by the government, right? And the reason you want to start offing all of the GWAT veterans is because when we get hurt at age 19, 20, and 21, you have to look after us till we're 75. Dude, that's so much money. That's so much money. So if we can get them to end their life and make it seem like it's their decision, then it's us being empathetic to what they need, right? So we're told our whole life, you never quit. You keep trying. You push through hard things. Suicide's never the option. You stick with us always, always, always. Until the government decides, you know what, it's actually easier. Why don't you just die? And not only that, why don't we promote it? And then you get department stores like Simon's department store in Quebec, who used a MAID patient to promote their home goods on a commercial that teenagers and young adolescents see. And they made it look fucking cool.
Your comparison to Nazi Germany, I think, is appropriate. I mean, that's literally what eugenics essentially is. We're just going to get rid of people we don't like, and we're going to filter them out. And for young people watching this show who might be teenagers, I suggest you go Google Nazi eugenics program. If you don't, I mean, and that's outside the Holocaust, which is a totally different beast in and of itself. But the Germans killed all sorts of people with mental disabilities, physical disabilities. I mean, it's disgusting. And I as an American, it's stunning to me that that's a thing. I encourage everyone to do all the research into it. I thank you very much for bringing it up because it is gross beyond comprehension. But Yeah, I mean, I'm sick to my stomach on a similar serious note, but not killing healthy people. There's a big debate right now in the U.S. military community over whether or not people should be able to tell their stories or whether they should not. Obviously, you have a book, Brass and Unity, that the viewer can see right next to you. It's also the name of your podcast, as we said earlier. Some people say, no, like, you shouldn't tell your stories if it's not meant for public consumption. Other people will say, it's not, I killed for those stories. It's my life. I did those things, and it's a healing process. I hear that a lot. I do podcasts because it makes me feel people care. I write a book because I have thoughts. Obviously, you wrote a book, but what would you say to people who would tell veterans, keep your mouth shut and suffer in silence?
How about you try and go do it and then suffer in silence and tell me how much longer you last? Here's the reality. You send us. We say send me. Send me. You sit on your couch and you watch your fucking TV and you eat your Cheetos and you gain your weight and be 75% overweight by the time we fucking get back. Don't sit there and tell me what I can and can't do with my life. I put my life on the line for you. You have every right to say whatever you want. That's what free speech looks like. I don't have free speech in this country anymore, but I'm telling the Americans that are listening, you say whatever you want. You do whatever you want, but these lives are our lives. These are our lives. We were willing to risk it. Really, we were willing to die on the battlefield for you to sit there and have a fucking opinion while you tweet away while you stuff your face with Cheetos. You do whatever the fuck you want, but you don't get to sit there and tell me and my friends how we heal and what we do to heal and what that looks like. And if that means that we write books on books on books on books, and that makes you salty because those books do well and put us on the map and you don't, and you just go about your life, all that tells me, and all that is you projecting your failures and your sadness and your loss. And you wish that you had the balls to get out there and be that vulnerable. And you know that you don't. So you sit there and you make negative comments and off the cuff shit, and you tell us that we shouldn't. The only time it becomes a liability and a problem when somebody writes a book is if that stuff is legitimately, and I mean legitimately, what's the word I'm looking for? Not confidential.
Classified.
Classified. Yes, classified. If you talk about things that you've signed a paper to say that you don't talk about, that's a different conversation. We're having two different conversations. If it means it's going to affect the safety of those on the ground and the operational at that time, that's a different thing. No, you don't write about that. But here's the thing. Most of these books take years and years to be vetted. Most of these books, by the time they come out, those operations are done and on and moved on, and it is whatever. But the reason that we keep fucking playing this feedback loop over and over and over again is because no one from World War I talked. No one from World War II talked. No one from Vietnam talked. And now you have a generation of GWAT veterans that says, fuck you, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm talking about this, if anything, to prevent the ongoing wars that we put ourselves in for no goddamn reason other than rich men putting young men to death. So I don't care what the opinion of the everyday person is. This helped me heal. This has helped other people talk about their stories. And this has helped other people move on and know that they can overcome anything, literally anything thrown at them. So you can have your opinion. You stay on your Twitter, your keyboard warriors, you eat your fucking Cheetos in your mom's basement, and you let me know when you go do something worth dying for. How about that?
Well, number one, I love that answer. I agree with you. I view it I was never in the military. Obviously, I enjoy hearing stories about recoveries and all that. That's why we're sitting here right now.
Yeah.
My thing is the U.S. military is civilian controlled. We have an elected president.
Yeah.
It answers to the public. It's funded by taxpayer money. So from a civilian perspective, I think it's ridiculous that there's this civil war among people in the service or veterans about who can say what. I think it's a lot of jealousy, quite frankly. I think that people get very upset when they see someone else blow up or do a huge interview. I know that has happened with guys from the unit, from Delta Force. It's happened with guys from SEAL Team 6. And they snipe at each other. I mean, the battle that they have behind closed doors is crazy to me. That's what I meant too. Like, not just the average day person, but other veterans bitching about people sharing their stories.
But you know what, though? You'll never see, like, the dudes on the back of this book, like the guys that reviewed this book. I have 1,800 words from some of the gnarliest dudes that have walked the face of the earth and carried a gun. Fucking SEAL Team 6 dudes, Army Rangers, you know, special operations, you name it. I got them all. I got them all because those are the dudes that aren't just complaining and saying, well, that veteran put something up. These are the dudes that are changing the world and saving our community. You're not going to hear it. You're not going to hear the sniping from people that are doing more than you. You're only ever going to hear it from people that are doing less than you. And all that tells me is that just because I'm up here doesn't mean I have to listen to your bullshit. I passed that. We're moved through that. If you don't want to help people heal, you don't want to help yourself heal, more importantly, and forgive yourself for the shit you did and move forward in your life, that's not my problem. I'm here to help you do that. I'm here to give you the tools to do that. And this book is here to help give you the path to do that. This ain't about me. This isn't about me. This is like Afghanistan's like one chapter in this book. This is my life all the way through, just like every other book. Like, dude, the computer that we are sitting on that I'm looking at right now, the amount of gnarly dudes books I'm looking at that are all operators that have all done something. Stuart Scheller, Neville Johnson, Matt Bass, Mason Rodriguez, Leo Jenkins, Dean Stott, Alana Stott, fucking you go, Andrew Adam Marr. Like, you go through it. Like, I can look around this room and just see books, and you never hear one shitty thing from any of those people. You know why? Because those people understand that when you get an opportunity to change the world or help even one person, if your story helps one person, it's worth all this. It's worth writing it. It's worth going through the hardship. It's worth the bullshit. It's worth the trolling. It's worth it all. Because if it gave one person the chance to go, you know what, I don't want to feel like this anymore. And if that person can get through it, then I can get through it. It's all that matters. That's it.
I love it. You have so much energy and passion when you talk about it. I mean, it makes me feel motivated to go out and do something. This is the last question I got for you, and this has been awesome. It's about your podcast. I want people to tune into it. I saw your interview. We exchanged some emails about this. They did with Kyle Morgan, who's kind of grown up into his own brand on social media, and he has such a crazy life story to tell and struggles of his own. When you started the podcast, what was the goal? And it keeps you connected to a world that you spent some formative years in. Was that kind of the point, to just feel that connection, or what was the purpose of Brass and Unity, the podcast?
Honestly, I wanted to be able to, it wasn't about staying connected to the community, because the show has ebbed into where it was mostly military to now it's every type of person possible. It's about showing people that you can go through the worst things that you could imagine, even the stuff that you couldn't fathom, you can go through and you can come out the other side. And you can not only come out the other side, you can fucking thrive. Like, I mean, like, look at the Black Rifle dudes. Look at Matt. Look at all of these guys. These guys went through some of the hardest things in the world. They have a public company worth billions of dollars. It's not about the money. It's about what that company was able to do with that money and with that opportunity. So when you have shows and you have podcasts where, in our space, you're telling people stories, you're holding space for someone, you're allowing them to say the worst things or the best things of their life, and you're just sitting there and you're just giving them a person to talk to. It's not about the show. I don't care if anybody ever listens to it. It's about giving that person the fucking space in that moment to be heard and to be seen and to know that I hear you. I fucking see you. I see the work you did. I see what you've done to get there, and you deserve to be heard by as many people in this world as possible, because we need more stories of overcoming. We need more stories of perseverance and resiliency, because we have got a weak fucking world out there. We have got a bunch of people who bitch and whine, who have done nothing in their lives. So they need to be slapped in the face with some real reality. And whether you're a CEO, whether you're a psychedelic adventurer, whether you're a Navy SEAL or an Army Ranger, a Delta operator, whether you're a fucking police officer or a firefighter, whether you're a goddamn teacher or you're a principal, I don't give a shit what your story is or where it comes from. If you have a story that you think can help others, I want to help tell it. I want to be the space where you feel comfortable enough to say some of these things.
I couldn't absolutely agree. I encourage everyone watching this right now to absolutely check out Brass and Unity, the podcast. Could you tell the audience real quick where they can find you on, whether it's Instagram, your website? Where should people go look if they want to learn more?
So if you type in the word Brass and Unity, a lot's going to pop up. We're very co-branded across the board. So we have the Brass and Unity podcast, We have a YouTube, we have a Patreon. When you join the Patreon, you also get access to our Signal group, which is our community called Mental Health Monday. And we have people from all over the world where we do challenges every month, where you can be a part of a real community. And then we do monthly calls. Our show is available, like I said, Apple, Spotify, you name it, we're there. If you love something, we ask that you share it and you rate it. You don't have money to spend, subscribe. It makes all the difference. We do have a brand called Brass and Unity Jewelry. I started that as art therapy on the kitchen table. We make pieces out of casings like this. And our whole thing is, buy a pack, call a buddy, save a life. We donate 20% of the net proceeds to different veteran and first responder organizations all over the world. We partnered with boot campaigns, support our troops, you name it. We have products for you. So that's the podcast. That's the brand. The book came out this July. It's called Brass and Unity, One Woman's Journey Through the Hell of Afghanistan and Back. I did not come up with the subtitle. Apparently you need them. That's what the publisher said. I was happy with just Brass and Unity, but apparently you needed one. So that book's available on Amazon, everywhere you buy your books, Barnes & Noble, Indigo, it doesn't matter. If you're looking for a signed copy and you want a buddy check pack with it, you can go to our website at brassandunity.com. I sign them for you and we send you out a buddy check pack as well. And then, like I said, everything else that we do, man, it just comes down to community. At the forefront of everything I do is community, absolutely community-based. If you need help and you are struggling and you are listening to this and you're like, I'm ready. I'm ready to move forward. I'm ready to take the next step. Reach out, shoot me a DM. I fucking answer. Shoot my company at info@brassandunity. We will help get you to the resources. And if you're like, I'm not sure if I'm ready, but I want to put my toe in and just find out, I'm a psychedelic integration coach. I'm also a coach and I work with high-level individuals to kind of get themselves started. Because at the end of the day, the best thing you can do for yourself and whatever it is that you try to do is start. The sooner you start, the sooner you heal, the sooner you grow, and the sooner your life can be better. So I encourage you to just start. I promise you can get through all of these things. So thank you so much for having me on the show and for the opportunity. I'm really looking forward to staying in touch.